to call the meeting to order. Mrs. Burns, roll call, please.
Mr. Sullivan?
Present.
Mrs. Hambeck?
Present.
Mr. Allen?
Present.
Mrs. Brochus?
Present.
Mrs. Lafferty?
Here.
Mrs. Marshall?
Present.
Mr. Rodriguez?
Here.
Mr. Sporny?
Here.
And Mrs. Waldweiser?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Any announcements?
No announcements.
The board met in executive session this evening to discuss matters of employment, issues related to labor relations, the lease of real property, litigation, and informational presentations were heard on Municipal Park and on the Oliver Hackman property. Mr. Bowman, Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Since this is our first meeting since we started the new school year a couple weeks ago, I want to say welcome back to our students and our staff. We're off and running, looking forward to all the great things coming our way this year. I had the opportunity to visit all of our schools the first few days and was pleased to see many happy faces everywhere. Overall, we had a smooth start with just a normal amount of adjustments to bus and class schedules, and we generally see this time of year. I want to thank our entire staff for their efforts in making the transition from summer to school year as easily and welcoming as possible. Last week, Ms. Hollenbach, Mr. Sullivan, and myself had the pleasure of recognizing Inspire Federal Credit Union and its president and CEO, Jim Merrill, for their donation of $126,000 to the district to offset the cost of the video scoreboard at Harry E. Frank Stadium. We're fortunate here at Neshaminy to have such strong support from the businesses in our area, and Inspire has been a consistent supporter of various activities in our schools. This kind of support is invaluable, and we very much appreciate this donation and their commitment to the students and our district. Last night, our district music teachers hosted the annual Instrumental Music Discovery Night at the high school. This was an opportunity for our elementary students considering taking up a musical instrument, the chance to try them out in person with help from some high school band and orchestra members, and for their families to find out how to get involved in our award-winning music program. Connecting our younger students with their high school counterparts is a great way to build excitement about the opportunities they will have as they move through the grades at Neshaminy. Finally, I want to remind everybody our back-to-school nights start with the high school this week on Thursday, then the elementary schools next week, and the middle schools take their turn the week after that. Parents and guardians should check their emails or school websites for back-to-school night schedules and other information. That's all I have, Mr. Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman. Time for the first public comment period. Mrs. Burns, anyone sign up?
There were no signups.
Okay. That brings us to our first set of action items. Mrs. Hollenbeck?
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I'd like to make a master motion for 2.01 certificated retirements/resignations, 2.02 certificated appointments, 2.03 appointments of sixth period assignments, 2.04 certificated ancillary appointments, 2.05 co-curricular appointments, 2.06 support retirement/resignations, 2.07 support appointments, 2.08 support leaves of absence, 2.09 support revised leaves of absence. I would also like to note under 2.01 certificated retirements resignations, I'd like to thank Cynthia Doan with 22 years. I hope she enjoys her retirement. And then on 2.06 support retirements resignations to Thomas McGoldrick, who has 19 years of service. Thank you both for your years of service, and I hope you enjoy retirement.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbeck. You have a motion on the floor. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Lafferty. Any comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 9-0. Mr. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. I'd like to make a motion for 2.10, an MOU with Lower Southampton SRO for 2024-2025. Whereas the Public School Code of 1949 is amended at Section 617.24 6 through 617, well, just subsection. Grants authority to a school district to enter into agreements with our political subdivisions to provide for the safety and security of its students and to secure the services of a school resource officer who may be employees of other political subdivisions. And whereas the Neshaminy School District, Lower Southampton Township, and Lower Southampton Police Department have agreed to the specific terms and conditions of the services to be performed and provided by an SRO set forth in the School Resource Officer Interagency Agreement. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy Board of School Directors hereby approves the School Resource Officer Interagency Agreement with Lower Southampton Township and the Lower Southampton Police Department, which has been reviewed and approved by the school district solicitor, and further authorizes the superintendent to execute said agreement on behalf of the Neshaminy School District. This file is attached.
Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez. We have a motion on the floor. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Marshall. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 9-0. Ms. Wolbezer?
I'd like to make a motion 2.11, proposed redistricting scenario. Whereas the Board Facilities and Finance Committee, based on the closure of Pearl S. Buck Elementary School, is recommending the attached scenario 3 as presented at the June 13th, 2024 committee meeting for the purpose of redistricting students. Whereas scenario 3 takes into consideration the current building and district enrollment numbers, geographical locations of elementary students, the consideration of limiting the number of students needing to be redistricted, the elementary to middle school catchment alignment, and the students from the census code areas encompassing the old Oliver Heckman Elementary School and current Pearl S. Buck Elementary School, who will be redistricted as a result of the Pearl S. Buck school closure. Whereas students from Pearl S. Buck Elementary School will be redistricted to Core Creek Elementary School in January of 2025, including those students in the Twin Oaks neighborhood. Whereas students from the old Oliver Heckman Elementary School, the neighborhoods of Terryton Estates and Langhorne Terrace, currently attending Herbert Hoover Elementary School, will be redistricted to Core Creek Elementary in the fall of 2025. The Brickman's Way, Walnut Ridge Grove, and Trevose Avenue areas currently attending Joseph Federbar will be redistricted to Tewanka Elementary School in the fall of 2025. Now therefore be it resolved that the Neshaminy School Board of Directors chooses scenario 3 for the redistricting of students as a result of the Pearl S. Buck school closure. Be it further resolved that the administrators and solicitor of the school district are authorized and directed to take any and all actions required to carry this resolution into effect. And there's a file attachment.
Thank you, Ms. Wolbezer. There's a motion on the floor. Can I get a second? Second by Mrs. Hollenbeck. Any comments or questions?
I would just like to thank the administration for all of their time and efforts they put into this to see which was the best course of action to redistrict the students. And I participated in some of them along with Mr. Allen. We did bus studies and timing studies and distance studies, and they looked at every different scenario. So I would just like to thank them for their thoughtfulness and all-encompassing view of it.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Okay. We do a second, Marty? Yeah, okay. All right. We have comments and questions. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 9-0. And we come to Mrs. Lafferty.
I'd like to make a motion 2.12, first reading of policy, whereas the Board Policy Committee reviewed the policies listed below at the May 16, 2024 committee meeting, and whereas the board policies listed below are being recommended for policy first reading, now therefore be it resolved that Neshaminy School Board of Directors reviewed the policies listed below and recommend a second reading and final adoption at the September 24th, 2024 Public Board meeting. Section number 707.1, use of school facilities, and the policy is attached.
Thank you, Mrs. Lafferty. There's a motion on the floor. Can I get a second? Second by Mrs. Brochus. Comments or questions? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion passes 9-0. Items for approval at the public board meeting. 3.01, routine business matters. 3.02, student settlement agreements. 3.03, PSBA state elections. 3.04, MOU dual enrollment high school enrichment program. Neshaminy School District and Bucks County Community College. 3.05, revised 24-25 school calendar. 3.05, district-wide facility study. 3.07, overnight trips. 3.08, Neshaminy School District Comprehensive Plan 2024-2027. That brings us to the committee reports. Mrs. Hollenbeck, Business Operations.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Our next business operations meeting is September 18th, which is next Thursday, 6:30 in this room. We'll be talking about some income investments, among other things. Again, committee meetings are where the discussions happen and more dialogue back and forth, so we would love to have some participants come join us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Hollenbeck. Educational Development, Mr. Rodriguez.
I know our next, thank you. Educational Development meeting September 17th in this building at 6:30, or at 7 o'clock, I'm sorry.
Facilities and Planning, Mr. Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. The Facilities and Planning Committee met on August 8th. At that time, we got an update on our summer projects. That included the sewer lines in both Maple Point and the high school. We got an update on where we are with our Core Creek Elementary. At that time, we also received a proposal from, I guess, Reynolds for commissioning that building. What that means is all the mechanical systems to give them a proper startup and a tune-in period, just to make sure nothing's gone awry, to get our building ready for our students. Update on the Fieldhouse project, the road improvements around Maple Point. We got an update on the Pequessing addition, and that's where we discussed the proposal for the facility capacity study that we just are going to approve the next meeting. Hopefully approve the next meeting. And that's to give a snapshot of where we are after all the chess pieces have been moved around, stirred up over the past couple of years. We want to take a look at where we are now and where we need to go forward in the use of our buildings. The next meeting of the Facility and Planning Committee is this Thursday, September 12th at 6:30 in this room. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Policy, Mrs. Lafferty.
Our next meeting for policy is October 24th at 6:30 PM in this room, and I echo Ms. Hollenbach's sentiments about joining us at the policy meetings for more interaction. Thank you.
Thank you. IU Board, Ms. Wolbeser.
Nothing to report at this time.
Thank you. Neshaminy Education Foundation, Mr. Sworny.
Yes, Mr. Sullivan, thank you. The board of the Neshaminy Education Foundation met here at Maple Point yesterday. They discussed many of their plans for the upcoming school year, including the second annual district-wide Castle Ball tournament, the annual Eagles ticket raffle, and the Neshaminy Alumni Achievement Awards ceremony in November, the Harlem Wizards game next spring, and more. Next meeting is Monday, October 14th, 4 p.m. here at the district office at Maple Point. Members of the community are welcome to attend and participate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sworny. PSBA Liaison, Mrs. Marshall.
No report at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Tech School, Mr. Allen.
Thank you again, Mr. Sullivan. The tech school met August 26th at 7:30. First up was we welcomed aboard our own Mr. Carlos Rodriguez as my fellow school director from Neshaminy, our representative, and we welcomed aboard Mr. Jason Bowman as our superintendent of record, and we thank you for taking on the challenge. We discussed in PIA, actually, we had a further meeting on our articles of agreement. I'm glad to report that we're pretty close to agreement. We have one more small detail to hammer out, which actually has to do with what we do with spare seating. We are here in Neshaminy always in need of wanting more seats. then we, our students that we send over there, we can't always sit them all, hence the lottery. But other districts don't make use of all of their seating. But there's no mechanism in place to pay for those seats or buy them off another district. So that, I believe, will be our final piece, and hopefully we can get a final agreement on that among the 6 districts, because I believe it ends this June. So, and then we got an update on what we're calling our Phase 3 project. Happy to report most of those projects went along well. There's a few still they're working on. They're being done on the back shift, so as not to interfere with the students. Students are back in the building. Had a couple rough startups with some RTUs, rooftop units. Small signal and communication wire that got accidentally cut. We walked into the boardroom, it was freezing cold, and the report was just an hour before, it was like 95 degrees with the heat on. So, there's always bumps and hiccups along the way, but we are getting on top of that. And of course, we talked about the normal startup of the school year, the hiring and moving teachers around, which I call the housekeeping of running a school running a district. Next meeting will be September 23rd at 7:30 in the boardroom over at the tech school. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. That brings us to the second public comment period. Anyone willing to approach the podium, just fight through the crowd and come on up. Anyone have any future topics? Any board comment? I think we covered the future meetings with all the reports. So that brings us to the adjournment of the meeting. I'd like to adjourn the meeting. Can I get a second? Second by Mrs. Hollenbeck. Meeting's adjourned.